Two. Says it is being live streamed. I'll check and confirm. The session will be, I think, will be of an hour or so. So we can then ask questions and engage in a conversation around the theme. Uh, okay, so we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Caravan. My name is Ishan Sharma, and this is part of this session today is part of the ongoing Caravan Film Appreciation Workshop that we started earlier this year to create a more discerning audience, maybe for this medium that is the most influential medium in the world, especially in times like these where we are living. It is important that we study cinema from a different perspective more than just being entertainers. There might be different layers that scholars as well as audience can look into and create a more can be more appreciative about this art form. And in that order, last week we had Atika Chauhan joining us to talk about the art of writing cinema. Today we have one of the best in the field. He has been a journalist, he has been a film critic, he has been a film director for New York Indian Film Festival. He is a best-selling author of three biographies. In history, we run away from writing biographies. That's the most difficult genre, even in history writing, to write biographies of individuals. But Aseem have done it. So he has written the biography of Irfan, Priyanka Chopra, and the most glamorous of all male actors ever, Shashi Kapoor. So all three are published by Rupa Publications and are available on different platforms as well as offline bookstores. So thank you so much, Aseem, for joining us. He was
Thank
also
you.
part of a film that I think he'll mention, Sita Sings the Blues. So very popular, very controversial, if we can call it, film, which should be watched by a lot of people. He was a voice artist in that. He gave voice in the film. So thank you so much, Yasin, for doing this. Welcome to this session. Over to you. I'll join you back again for the conversation after this session.
Thank you. So, thank you, Ishan, first of all, and hello, everyone there. I have to tell you that I'm not an academician. I don't uh, teach film studies. I don't teach anything. So, um, I'm just going to have a general conversation which will sort of flow in different directions or something like that. I mean, I've been a journalist for a very long time, a film journalist. Uh, I do less film reviews, more columns. I do film reviews, of course. That's what we're going to talk about right now. But I do more columns. I do more conversations, interviews with filmmakers, directors. You guys can Google my name, and there's a lot online. But we want to talk about the art of film critique. So first of all, did you guys both? I'm sure you guys may have watched Lutera before, but did you also watch Notorious?
Yes,
So,
I have. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to touch, both the films deal with, to me, they deal with romance, and both have a situation where the two characters who are in love with each other are not able to express it, or at the right moments, or are able to realize their romance as such. Notorious, it ends with he saves her, so hopefully, she'll, but she's already married to a guy, if she divorces him. Um, but I mean, they're very different films, and also Notorious was made in the mid '40s, 1940s. Lutera was it's only about 10 years or even less than that. Um, but I don't know. I haven't reviewed Notorious. I think it's a really fantastic Hitchcock film because um, one of the most exciting things about Notorious to me is, where it does the suspense lie. If you guys saw the film this past week, um, It's at this party scene where the wine is running out, and you get tense because the or champagne is running out, and both Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant's character have gone down to the cellar, and you know that somebody's going to come there to get some more wine, and and the camera keeps looking at the wine bottles and the champagne bottles in the ice bucket, and more and more glasses being poured, and I thought that was really a fascinating way to build the tension, really. But anyway, but to me, the romance is very vital part of both the films. In general, I believe that when you write a review, you're basically trying to convey to whoever your audience is, whether it's print or online or you have a blogger or whatever. Uh, you're basically trying to convey to them how you felt watching the film. How did the film impact you? Uh, where, in what ways did the film touch you? In what way emotionally? I usually don't like to write reviews of films if I don't like films, but some film, but I've done that also because I've been asked to. Um, it's mostly about expressing your experience of having watched the film on in writing. And and you guys all know, one doesn't need to say, because you guys, we all watch movies, and you know that cinema has, uh, at the medium, it's so much more, so many more elements in it than a novel, for instance, because a novel it's how the writing unfolds, how the story unfolds, how the writer leaves it all to your imagination, because you start to build these images in your mind while you're reading a novel. When you're watching a film, actually you have less to work. I mean, you have a lot of work to do also, but you're already being shown uh, in the images that the director has created. You're already seeing how the director has created a plot through the screenplay. It's a very important element of I mean, that's the foundation of any film. Um, how the director has brought in the actors, if the actors really sort of, in a realistic way, if they portray the characters, or in whichever sense the film is supposed to go. It could be a comedy, it could be a thriller, it could be a romance film. How the actors play the roles that have been assigned to them. Um, but so much more goes into making the film. There's cinematography, because basically you're watching. Um, so what is coming before your eyes? What are the images that you're absorbing? But it's also about how the images are put together, which is what editing is all about. Especially if you see Lutera, for instance. I watched it again today, but I watched it a couple of times. Uh, in the second half, there's a whole chase sequence through these gullies or Dalhousie. And I think it is one of the best. I mean, there's a very, very effective chase sequence for a Indian film, really. Um, but you could actually watch that scene again and again just to see how the editing is done, because the camera is looking at Ranveer Singh running towards you. The camera is behind Ranveer Singh, so that could be from the perspective of somebody who's chasing Ranveer Singh, the cops, Adil Hussein's character. If Ranveer Singh turns, then there's a cut. But the cuts are so smooth that you don't sense any abruptness. It the whole sort of narrative just flows, and you start to believe in these people running. And it's not, of course, there are directors who play with this gimmick very well, actually, where they just don't edit, and it just, these are long shots that go on. But then some of the best, action chase sequences are done with edits, and yet the edits don't um hinder your experience, your visual experience of going through that. Other elements in the film, the costumes, for instance. Lutera is a very good example, for instance, because Lutera is a period piece created now, in the current times. Uh, what are they wearing? Because Notorious, for instance, uh, was also shot in the mid 40s. So whatever the costumes are, and of course you see that there are a lot of limitations in the way that film was made because technology had not advanced in such a strong way. But especially in Lotera, the costume, the first half, the traditional Bengali household, the saris that Sonakshi Sinha's character wears, the pants and the shirt the men wear, uh, every aspect of it, because what costumes do is, and if the actors really fit into those costumes and flow with the costumes, that enhance basically the uh, the actors. The actors performance uh is very much, enhances the word. Basically, it helps the actor to sort of portray who or what she or he is supposed to be doing, because what you wear it also represents your class background, what time of your history, whether it is current times or whatever. Uh, Music. Lutera has a beautiful background score. Notorious has much more of uh, again, the kind of music that was being used around that time. But Lutera has a beautiful background score. Um, it And the songs, which are very vital in most Indian films, how the songs sort of play, because they don't actors don't break into singing anymore, which used to happen in the even until the 90s and 80s and 70s and 60s, before that. um, but where are the songs used? How do the songs represent the mood of the characters in terms of how they're reacting, how they are feeling, or what the director wants you to do? I mean, it's not like director is spoon feeding you basically, but songs definitely help the narrative to progress. And so, that's a very important aspect of your storytelling also. Um, I don't know how many of you read the review I did of Lotera. I also read that. In fact, I just read it about half an hour ago, and I was critiquing my own review because I realized that I really don't tell a lot about the story. I mention period, I mention romance, mention first half, second half, Dalhousie, all of that. But I really don't talk about the landlord and these two guys who come to the landlord's house to basically rob the landlord, and then the romance of the characters, the characters breaking up, and then or Ranveer's character leaving and then reappearing. Um, but what I ended up doing is my got first 8 paragraphs actually. I'm talking about the romance in the film because it hit me that that's what really impacted me. Um, I so the opening intro paragraph, no matter what article you write, what the review you write, it's very important to be able to pull people. So I right immediately start talking about how do people fall in love and how do they realize they fall in love, and then I begin to describe how these two people probably fell in love when they had the accident, and how they're able to slowly, it's not they jump into romance immediately, they slowly sort of progress to the romance. Um, I thought that was the most important aspect of the film. I mean, it has many other things going for it. The story itself, the as I said, the period drama. Um, but I, as an individual who was asked to go to write a review of the film, felt that was what propelled me to sort of emotionally go through the whole journey of the characters. And I thought, and when you're writing also, it's not like you say, okay, next paragraph is going to be this, next paragraph is going to be this, etc. You just go, and I've been writing for a very long time. I'm not saying I'm a great writer or something like that, but with your experience, what happens is you just go with how the film is playing back in your mind and how you are expressing it on your laptop eventually to reach the audience that you want to reach, which is what I ended up doing writing about romance. I mean, I ended up also writing about the songs. I ended up writing about the actors, their performances. Um, Ended up talking about Vikram Motwani, how he's this was his second film, and how there's a real promising career. Of course, since then he's made five, six films. He's done a series also. Um, you know, one of the things I have not been able to do, but I see critics who are very seriously, but they carry a notepad, a book with them, and they write notes. I've actually seen in the US. I haven't seen here. I've seen critics that they have pens which have a slight light, so they're able to put the light on and able to read what they're writing basically. But the light is not so strong that it'll disturb the people sitting around them. Um, I have had. There have been times when I'm reviewing a film. For instance, I have to review a film. I'll put my phone on very quickly, and just in a Gmail draft mode, I'll write some line. There's a dialogue that I liked, or some element I like. Because the thing is, you tend to forget. You know, you don't want to forget minor details which you can then refer to in your review. You come back, the story, the characters, if you like the film, it lives with you. But sometimes it's just nice to just quote one dialogue without giving away the story itself, something that's funny, or whatever it is. And it helps if you're able to keep those notes, because when you start to type, I have those notes with me, haphazard notes, um, without any sizing. One of my favorite songs is the Savarlu, yeah. Um, so I think it just helps you when you start to create your the body of your review, that you can then touch upon some of the things you've written. um, I think it is important because at the end of the day, filmmaking is such a um, it's a group effort. First of all, it's also there's a lot of hard work, um, that if things that stand out for you, you should mention. I mentioned the songs in the film. I mentioned the music. I realized that actually I had not mentioned the cinematography, and I watched it again now, and I watched it a few times. It is so stunningly beautifully shot, because it starts off in the Zamindar's house, where there's very early in the point itself, the father says to the daughter that electricity has come to their village. And then she jokes like, "Oh, so when will it leave?" or something like that. But before that, so most of the first half of the film is beautifully lit. Inside the house, of course, very glowing kind of light. But even the outdoor scenes are all very very bright, you know, um, as opposed to, there's a big, the second half, you take a break, as opposed to suddenly you're in Dalhousie. And I'm not saying that hill stations are cold, but the film sort of takes you at a point where it's already winter setting in, and then it snows also. It's gray and gray and gray, and that is also the mood of the film at that point, because you have one character who's dying, another character who's trying to escape and may die also. And there is general sadness that's prevailing in the in the house where Sonakshi Sinha is living. Um, Father has died. She's coughing. She's gotten TB, um, and is living through the sadness of her heart having been broken by this man. And so, I mean, these are very obvious things that many filmmakers do, but you don't tend to notice it until you want to really notice it. And I think as critics, you should be able to talk about this, because I think so much goes into creating the mood that is presented to you. That's why I said earlier, when you're reading a novel, it's the words, it's the way the story unfolds, It's the way the characters are, but the writer leaves it to your imagination. You build that house, the characters moving around, how they talk, where they meet. In the film, it's all shown to you. Now, of course, there are films that leave a lot to your imagination. There are a lot of experimental things. Uh, Not all films have straight linear narratives, and you have to guess. You have to. A lot of times you come out of a film, and you're like, "What was this about?" And you start to have conversations with your friends, and they have a different feeling. You have a different feeling. But what I was trying to say was that it's good to notice different aspects of that elements of the film that have enhanced. And I did not write about the cinematography, which is I think it's a mistake in my review. And I ended up actually realizing that Mahendra Shetty, who shot the film, he also shot Udan, which was very well shot. I didn't know about. I mean, if I had tried to figure out what he had done at the time of Lutera, the only film I knew of was Udan. After that, he went on to shoot a Bengali film, actually two Bengali films, Jonaki, but the one before that, Labor of Love. I don't know. Has anyone seen Labor of Love? There was one Bengali in the group here, but yeah, you, um, Labor of Love is made by a filmmaker called Aditya Vikram Sengupta. It is perhaps one of the best Indian films I've ever seen because there are no dialogues in the film. There is sound, there is ambient sound, there's radio playing. It's a story about a married couple where the husband works at a night shift and then he comes home and he's exhausted and his wife has just woken up and she's cooked food for him and then she goes to her job. So, and then when she comes home in the evening, he's going. So it's just this routine of the life, but it's done in such a poetic style without any dialogues being spoken between them. But it's short, stunning. I mean, but, and it hit me later that I could have talked about it. Um, you know, I said earlier, is it important to tell the story to the audience? Some people want to know what's the film about. But even if you start to write about what the story is about, obviously you're not supposed to tell the whole story. Obviously, you're not supposed to give away any surprises, any twists, because you want. And I've had the problem. Sometimes even trailers tell you so much about a film these days that when you go to watch it, you think you know the whole thing, and it's actually often true. The trailer sort of starts in the beginning of the film to the end of the film also, and you're like, why? And in fact, trailers give away so much scenes um, that you're expecting those scenes to come also. It's almost like the film. So I have a film critic friend, Chhabra Gupta, who's one of the finest film critics, right? So Indian Express. Uh, she uh, she says to me she never watches trailers, um, and it's not something I don't necessarily believe in that because when you get excited about a film that's coming, you want to watch the trailers. Um, how much of the story you reveal is very important, or how much. In my case, in Lutera, for instance, without even start, I said already, I gave a sense of what the film is about, and I think that is enough. Or you could actually have a paragraph or something about the story. So, but the thing is, it's also when you're writing, every paragraph has to flow, and it's not like one paragraph has to be the story, one paragraph to be acting. It has to sort of feel a very organic flow kind of a thing. Um, and so while you're describing how you felt to watching the film, you can describe a little bit of the story, or you could write more about the actors, or you could write about how and the actors, how the chemistry between them, how they were able to relate to each other. There's so much you can work with, and there is no hard and fast rule in terms of A, B, C, you know, till the end of the alphabet that you have to write all of these things. But as I said, it is important to realize that since you're giving the audience, your readers, a sense of what you've written, um, I think it helps to give as much you can without giving away, you know, the necessary, touch upon things so that people get a sense. Because basically, people are reading a review to decide whether they want to watch the film also. I actually like to read reviews after I've seen a film also to see how the critics liked it. But that's a different way of treating reviews. Most reviews are supposed to, and the ratings given is basically to convince your readers, your audience, whether they should go see the film or not. One of the last things. I mean, we can talk more about it because I didn't have a sort of a fixed sort of a narrative. I was thinking about if I had to review something like Notorious now, because Notorious is because it's set in the 1940s. Um, it requires giving more of a context to the audience, your readers, because you need to be able to tell them that the film is set during the war. It's a spy, sort of a romantic spy thriller, where a woman takes up a job with the daughter of a spy who's been convicted, and she takes up a job to go and to travel to Brazil to be able to see how some pro-German elements living there are working and supporting, and what are they doing basically the war efforts. So that becomes very important, if you wanted somebody to watch Notorious, for instance. Um, if you wanted to, wanted to write about Notorious, if you wanted to write about Notorious, you would also want to talk about, um, the two stars of that time, both Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, and how, if you have a sense, if you've seen some of the other films, how they play this particular role, um, the heartbreak that sort of plays between them. Because Bergman has done similar heartbreaking roles. You've seen Casablanca, I'm sure some of you, most of you. Um, and then eventually Notorious is an Alfred Hitchcock film. Alfred Hitchcock put a lot of romance in his film, but also where is the exciting thriller part of the film? So that becomes very specific because Vikram Motwani was only 2 films old. Um, if you review a film by Alfred Hitchcock, obviously you want to talk about something about his history of his work, what he had done before, uh, to be able to convey to your readers again that how this film sort of flows in that Alfred Hitchcock frame of filmmaking. Um, So, what I was going to say was the last thing I wanted to just basically talk about is, how your intro, which I basically said, your intro has to be something like a summary, but not exactly a summary. You're not exactly saying, oh, this film is about X, Y, and Z or something. In 1 or 2 sentences, 2, 3 sentences, you give the theme of the film, how it appeared to you without saying this is the theme of the film. And when you end your review, it's not like you say in conclusion. I ended up saying something like Lutera is like a beautiful gift wrapped or something like that. I said something because to me it was such a pretty film that it felt like it was a gift that was given to me by the director. And I put that eventually, that the feeling that you get when you get a beautifully wrapped gift presented to you, that's a feeling I had watching the film. I didn't say in so many words, but that was my last sentence about. Um, that's what you need to do. You need to find words, you need to find some sentences to be able to convey a concluding sense of what the film was about to you. As I said, without saying in conclusion. Um, and then of course the rest of the body, as I said earlier, it flows with how you feel about the film, with different elements that I mentioned. Um, and as I said, there are no hard and fast rules about how reviews are written. I think before you guys start to think about writing reviews, read other critics, regular critics, especially, and read. If you've seen the films, if you know the film, go back to reading old reviews of films you've seen, because it just helps you to build. You don't want to copy anybody. You don't want to do that, but you need to get a sense of how other well-known people in the field, critics, film journalists, are expressing their thoughts about the film. And that's the best way to learn, to read more and more, and find your own voice, find your own style. Don't copy. As I said, there's no hard and fast rule about how reviews have to be done, but once you're able to say it in the way you want to say it, and you write some other reviews, um, I think a good practice would be that you just start to write some reviews, share it with some friends or something like that in your WhatsApp group or something, to get feedback also before you set out to. It's a completely different story now how you go to pitch writing a review or something. That's a very, very different session, really. But before you try and sell your review to somebody, um, ask around people how they felt, what they think of your review is. Write more, read other reviews without copying. See how that writer is going. How would you then write um, a review of the same film, but in your own voice?
Yeah,
I think I'm going to end here because
yeah,
these are just some random thoughts I had, which I sort of put together in my head, and I mentioned, and I hope, um, as I said, I'm not a university professor or something like that, but the idea basically was to, what I wanted to do was to put some food for thought in your mind, basically, so that helps you to develop, um, film criticism, film review.
yeah. No, you made some brilliant points, and I think we already talked about this in the class also, that there is no set formula of writing a review. There's no structure. Like, we can't give you a format like पहले वो letter to editor देते थे कि that's how you write a letter. That's not how it goes. It's about you, how you as a person feel about an art piece. What comes to your mind first? As Aseem also mentioned about his Lutera review, that he wrote about love. That's the first thing that came to his mind. It could be different for all of us. For me, as a history student, something historical might have strike, when because it is a his period drama. Brilliant film. Also, Asim, why don't you also talk about how do you select genre? Because genre is again very there's no set formula for genres as well in cinema. So do you create your own genres, or could genres differ from each other, like all the reviewers have their own set of genres?
Well, if you're a regular film critic that you have to review films every week, then but genre means, different themes and different. So you have to review comedy, you have to review thrillers, you have to review romance, you have to review action, whatever comes your way. So it's not. Uh, I've been very fortunate in my life for many, many years now. I've been a freelancer, so I write what I want to. I'm asked to write. I'm commissioned to write articles. Sometimes I say no because it's difficult for me or whatever it is. Um, Sometimes the story, that kind of film doesn't interest me, and I don't want to go there. Um, so it depends on the nature of your job. But as a critic, eventually, and if you're a full-time critic or something like that, you have to be able to accept every genre. You have to be able to, by accept means you have to visit every genre when you're going to be writing a review.
So, in today's time, what do you think about reviewing most of the films that come out in India? Because they follow a stream of thought. So, some
I
politically charged
No, no,
films that are coming.
yeah, you know, politics aside, I think there are some very good critics. I mean, recently Film Companion shut down, but I think Rahul Desai writes really well. I mentioned my friend, um, Shubhra
Chhabra,
Gupta, and also
yes,
Namrata Joshi. Both are very, very good
Prasad.
critics. I uh, what's happened is now with social media, with YouTube, and uh, this whole influencer sort of a mindset that's developed. Everybody thinks and can become a critic, and I see so many people writing reviews. But the thing is that something I should have mentioned. I think it's very, very important when you start to write reviews. You need to, with Hitchcock's. I mentioned that you need to have an understanding of cinema. You need to have an understanding of history of cinema. You need to have an understanding of even how romance has been shown in Indian films. Um, because I see often young people, and I'm not critical. It's not like they think they already know everything, and can and now of course on Twitter and social, everybody's reviewing things. People can just say it um, in the few characters that are given to you. Um, I think that culture is becoming it's becoming really strange. It is affecting good conversations about cinema sometimes, because what's happening is people who are consuming this information as well as people who are providing this information are both, and I don't want to sound condescending, often are not film savvy. फिल्म देखने सब देख लेते हैं फिल्में, देखने में कुछ इसमें ऐसा नहीं है, but understanding films का क्या है, that comes through experiences, of having watched and having read, or you guys do film appreciation courses, even the National Film and Television Institute also has like a 1 or 2 months film appreciation course. That really helps you because you get to see world cinema, you get to see Indian cinema, you get to see different genres. That prepares you to be able to express your opinions when you're writing about a particular film. So anyway,
That's very true. And also on the point of history, it's not compulsory to mention history of a film when you are reviewing it, but it also is an interesting insight when you mentioned Vikramaditya Motwani, and the cinematographer's earlier work that you didn't mention in the review.
yeah, but even history thematically, sorry for cutting you, but maybe I should have mentioned that the film deals with the zamindari period and not the period when
Yeah,
zamindari was abolished, for instance. As I said, when if you were to review Notorious, it's very essential to be able to at least say that the film is set in a time period where we are not seeing the war happening in Europe, but we are seeing the effects of the war. So FBI and American spies and German spies, how that world is functioning and impacting the war in Europe. So you need to be able to explain that in a few words in few sentences to your audience. That history also.
yeah, that's very true. Somebody has asked you what's your favorite review and the worst review that you have done.
So hold on. There were. So what's your favorite? Hold on. Got it.
Vajia, okay.
Sawal
No, no.
Udulabi. What's your most and least favorite genre to review? Uh, I'll tell you what's my most favorite genre to watch. If I get to review, it's fine. Um, and I actually, it's somehow realized it this past week, and I'll tell you what. I like thrillers a lot, but I like not just general shootout action films, etc. Thrillers with twists, thrillers with the characters having developed, and you start to get emotionally involved with the characters in their life. So I was this past week from Monday to Friday, I was at an Ayurvedic spa in Kerala with a cousin of mine. So the whole day we would get these massages and treatments, and then they would be all this vegetarian food. But then they wanted us to get to bed early, which we couldn't. So every night I showed my cousin a film. The first 2 nights actually. So there's a film called Witness with Harrison Ford. It's a 1984 film, um, directed by Peter Weir, an Australian filmmaker. It's a it's a fantastic thriller, but it's also a thriller that is set in the almost 1984. So we talk about a 40-year-old film, or maybe 1985, 39-year-old film. But it's set in a part of Pennsylvania in America where there's a community called the Amish. There are immigrants from Europe who live as if it is still the 1600s. They don't have electricity, they don't have telephones. They are basically farmers who work within their own community, and they don't drive cars. They have horse-driven carriages. And the story is about a little kid who is an Amish kid who has to travel by. He's traveling by train with his mother to go to Baltimore, and he witnesses a murder taking place. Uh, the next, there's a one of my favorite films of all time. It's a French thriller called The Elevator to the Gallows. It's a 1959 film, black and white French thriller about two characters, a man and a woman, no, the many characters, but their relationship, and she's married, and the plan is to kill the husband, and so they can get away, and then lots of twists happen. And then on Thursday night we watched Talented Mr. Ripley, which is uh, it's been made a couple of times in film. This is Anthony Mangela's version with Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow and Matt Damon, Anthony Minghella. So based on Patricia Highsmith's very, very well-known novel, also called The Talented Mr. Ripley. Now there's a new Netflix series also, and there was a French version of it called Purple Noon, which sad coincidence that the actor in Purple Noon, Alain Delon, actually just passed away today. So yeah, Namika Singh is one of her favorite films, Witness. So yeah, I really enjoy watching those films, and I think writing about them would be probably the most exciting thing.
I think Prashant has a question. Prashant, why don't you unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Aseem. Got some interesting points. One of the points you mentioned was write what you felt. I mean, when you were watching the film, like try to express that in words. What if you felt nothing? How do you write a review of a film that did nothing for you? Like, where do you start there? I mean, do you have any examples of films that you did nothing for you, or you couldn't really get something to?
I Yes. Although, as I said, because I'm a freelancer, I often don't. But I remember writing a review of Anurag Kashyap's Bombay Velvet, which with Ranbir and Anushka. It was one of the biggest flops in the history of Indian cinema, as they always say. A very, very expensive film to mount, um, a period drama about the creation of Bombay as we understand today in Mumbai. Um, and they actually went and shot a substantial part of the film in Sri Lanka because they couldn't find the kind of buildings they wanted to the neighborhood they wanted to visit. Um, I thought the film was very empty. Um, and I can dig up my review and pass it to you. I remember not liking the film at all. I thought the film was really very empty. I thought one of the problems with that film was that it was based on a non-fiction book by Gyan Prakash. Uh, what is it called?
Mumbai
Mumbai
Fables.
Fables. Mumbai
Yeah,
Fables. Yeah. So I think to uh, from that to take it into fiction and then also talk about a jazz era. There was a lot that Anurag Kashyap was trying to achieve, and I felt that none of the characters mattered to me, even though it was visually beautiful. Some of the songs are really fantastic. The costumes, the production design, uh, but in that in such a large sort of a production presentation, the soul of the story was lost. The soul of the idea that we should have gotten was lost. And that's what you start to do because, I don't want to just say absolute crap, don't go and watch it. I want to be able to say why it didn't work for me. But I also wanted to say, because I feel, I mean, I've never made a film. Um Ishan mentioned as a voiceover artist in an animation film called Sita Sing the Blues. Very different experience. But I know people work very hard. There's a lot of money riding. And there are some filmmakers I really can't stand. I don't, there's arrogance, the style of filmmaking is bad or whatever, it doesn't work for me. Um, but I had to say why Bombay Velvet is not working for me. And I had to say that in all of these things that Anurag did, I think he lost, um, again, as I said, the soul, the narrative, uh, the characters should have mattered to us more. So that's what you do.
So, do you back away from, or do you try to be kind in some sense? Given that it's a team effort, there's a lot of work that's behind it. There's do you or do you or do you don't worry about that at all?
Yeah, my life is too complicated, really. Yeah, I also I program a film festival in New York, and some of these people that if I don't like their films, then I invite them, and um, I cannot be dismissive. I don't. It's not because of my life. I think any form of uh, work, unless it's like really crappy film. I mean, there's a horror film I saw at the Berlin Film Festival called Cuckoo, and it's gotten really bad reviews now. That was really annoying. I was like, what the hell is happening? Of course, I know they put in a lot of hard work, but it just made you feel so unpleasant that although I didn't review it, but I would have sort of been much more dismissive. Um, in Bombay Velvet, I tried to understand what went wrong. I tried to explain what went wrong because it's a very very ambitious project, and sometimes ambitions do not high ambitions don't result in uh, are not effective. So
Thank you, Prashant. Shrutanu, Anamika ji, Vatsala, any questions? It is a tricky business, I think, writing reviews and then also leading a film festival, Aseem.
yeah,
Vatsala has a question. Vatsala, why don't you unmute yourself? I'll put you on spotlight.
And really good conversation, Naseem. I was just thinking, do you really have to put the plot? Like you mentioned that you did not put the plot in Lotera. I would really like reviews not to put the plot, but like right like you did, because then you arouse the curiosity of the person going to see the movie, and you're not kind of telling them the story.
I agree with you. I agree with you, but you need to be able to say
Yes,
enough, and maybe I could have
the
said more.
background.
Maybe I mean I could have mentioned zamindari aspects of it, something like that. Um, some aspects of background because I think a big part of what you feel about the film also is about how the story works for you. And so, and there have been reviews I've done where I start off by the film is about X, Y, something like that, without going beyond two or three sentences and giving away the
Correct.
rest of it. Um,
Exactly.
and then the audience figures out, and I don't tell about like some character die in the middle or whatever happens or other characters come and other complications happen. You go watch the film and you'll experience it yourself.
Exactly. I would really like that. There is a line though, which you wrote in your review saying that in the second half there is a coincidence that occurred.
So I had to think about what I wrote. I just read it today also, and I'm saying, what am I talking about? I think it's about the time in because I saw Lutera also today. Um, when Ranveer Singh's character arrives in Dalhousie, he ends up renting the place, the house that Sonakshi Sinha's renting, and of course Sonakshi Sinha's put a sign outside saying, to let or something like that, looking for a renter. Um, but Dalhousie is a fairly big city, and I'm sure the town it was pretty big even in the 1950s or something like that. The fact that they come right there, it's a little convenient for the narrative.
Totally
So
right. And I really appreciate the way you talked about how in the first half everything is bright outside and how it's gray, and that's something that the viewer wouldn't by default notice. So those
well,
are the
you should watch actually. In fact, a lot of people criticize Hollywood films, for instance. A lot of the Hollywood films which are set um, in the Middle East or Africa tend to show very dusty sort of settings, and it's almost some many people have said it's almost racist because it's basically in that style they're basically telling the viewer how uncomfortable this country is or this region is. So, how the film is shot and how it is lit or not lit or something like that is a big part of what the director and the cinematographer are thinking and how they want you to feel about the setting where the film is set.
super.
Thank you, Vatsala. Nutan ji has a question. And those who have questions can raise their hands so that I'll know that I'll have to unmute and put you on the spotlight.
So you mentioned that it was pretty convenient for them to come to that particular guest house. Actually, that police superintendent, whosoever he was, they did mention that we will shut all the other guest houses and we'll
Oh,
keep this open. Yeah, because I noticed it. And
acha,
since you
acha, acha.
mentioned it, I thought
So,
I will
but
tell you.
Buddy says this afterwards. So
Ha, ha.
after
But
they've taken the guest house,
initially, yes,
after they've
yes.
taken the guest house, then the police inspector mentions it. So technically,
He
for
mentioned it, yeah.
the
And
audience,
another thing which I wanted to say was, see, you have said that we have a free like flow of expressing our feelings while writing a review. So how do we decide whether what I have written is sufficient or not? Number one, and number two, how do we decide whether it's a good review or just an ordinary review then?
So
Because
that's
it
what I'm
is
trying to tell
pretty
you
up
that,
to
yeah, yeah,
it is pretty
yeah,
up
no, no.
to me. Yeah.
So there are a few things I said. Read a lot of reviews, especially
Okay.
of films that you know, that you've seen,
Hmm.
because you figure out how the other critic is expressing, and if you know the film, especially, it's a very good way to. I often enjoy reading reviews, as I said, after I've watched the film, and it's always a learning experience for me also. So that is the best way to learn how films are being reviewed. That's why I said watch Lutera and read my review. I'm not saying my review was any great or something like that. It gives you a sense of, if you know the film, you understand maybe how my mind is working as a critic also. And then the other thing
Yeah.
I said was, start to write your own reviews and share them with people. Share them with your friends. Share them with people who you trust. To get a sense of, you'll learn more from people who you trust, who'll tell you what's the best way to do it, or
So
where you're going wrong.
here I would
Yeah.
like to point out another thing. Like, our minds are pretty pliable that way. Like if I read Ishan's review, I will, go with him. And if I read somebody else's, I will say, yes, yes, what this person is saying is also right. So we just keep flowing with them. That's what I was thinking, that we don't remain, stuck to one place. Okay, this is the review I feel, it should be.
Well, there are people I know who will just read one critic, and because they feel very comfortable with that one critic. There are people who don't even read the reviews and they just go see what the ratings are. So now, often, many publications don't carry ratings because they
Yes.
want the audience. The New York Times doesn't have a rating, for instance. And you sometimes you read the New York Times review and they're so well written, but you can't even tell if they really like the film or they really did not like the film. Sometimes it's sort of middle way kind of a thing, until they're very obvious sometimes when they didn't like the film. But that's the whole art, and it sometimes helps to even read the review twice. Uh, you know, you read the review once, read it the second time to see how the thought process is flowing, how each paragraph is structured, how each paragraph flows from another paragraph. And I'm not saying you copy that style, but that's the best way to learn, to, to see how professionals are able to do that. Uh, that's the best training you can get. But I think, instead of reading one critic only, it's very important. I mean, this weekend, this film, 2 was released. If you've seen the film, go read 3, 4 reviews and see different people how they've uh, felt about the film. It it's a very good learning exercise.
Yeah, and always keep the pen with you as well, huh? As I
Yes,
already
I do.
mentioned. So this is the rule
I've been
in
doing
this
this.
workshop, that I always ask them to buy a notebook, a small diary, along with a pen that they have to carry with them in the cinema hall. They can write on that during the interval. That's what I do, so that you won't miss, as Asim said, because I was just, when he mentioned about that pen with the light, I was just searching for it on Amazon. There, it's not available in India,
Is it available
at
in
least.
India?
So you have
It
to wait
is.
for the
It is.
interval to write. But
Yeah,
we'll take two quick questions.
yeah, I
Yeah,
put
you were
my
saying.
my phone on. I put the light to the minimum, and I put it on the side because sometimes there's a dialogue that's been spoken. I'm like, my God,
Yeah.
the dialogue is so great. I have to write it down. I'm not sure if I necessarily will be able to use it in my review, but I need to write it down right now because it is helping me, how I'm feeling about the film. Okay.
Yeah. We see, this is my small diary that you can see. Yeah.
Arey wow. Very
You can
impressed.
invest in these diaries, everybody. It's a mini so diary, not sponsored, but
Yeah.
Nutan ji also have that now. So Shutanu and Anamika ji, both your questions we'll combine in the interest of time.
Okay.
Aseem, Aseem, first of all, thank you.
Thank you.
Like last time, we are first time, at least I am first time meeting a professional critic. And it is so wonderful to understand the mechanics of what goes on the mind of a critic before they give the sketch for the film. So thank you. Thank you once again for that. Now, my question to you is, I'm not a professional critic, film reviewer, so to speak. Neither that is my intention from this course. As a film lover, I look at a film review, and if I ever have to write a film review, I've got two paths in front of me. One is a descriptive path, and one is implicit path. I think you explained pretty well the descriptive path of how to write a review. You give a broad idea of a structure in terms of the broad highlights of the film, talk about some techniques and photography and so on and so forth. And that is very useful. But I also suspect from 5, 10 years down the line, that style may become redundant because AI will just take all of it. They can do a pretty good job and give you the whole description of the plot and so on and so forth. What perhaps personally, and this might be my own minority view, is attractive to film reviewers what is implicit in the film. So if I look at the two films that you have suggested, both Notorious and Lutera, to me, on the face of it, it is of romance, it is of for suspense, it is of, in a sense, a spy and a conman and so on and so forth. But if you look at the implicit part of it, to me, it is what the story is about, in a sense, for trust. Shall I give the trust and not to give the trust? In the case of Cary Grant, you have the whole interplay between Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, not in the classical format for romance, because both of them have the sparks flying, but the trust is perhaps not so solid. In the Lutera, the trust is there, but the trust is broken. So to me, the theme is of the trust. And specifically in the case of Lutera, and to a minor extent, and in the case of Notorious, I would say it's a parents' film. It's like Motwani in his second film, maybe a decade before Vanga, had this parents' issue with him. So if you look at his Uran, his first film, that's the father issue. And you look at this, Sonakshi and the Zamindar, that had a parent issue. So I think those are themes which may not be necessarily popular to mass feed film. I'm not going to use the word promotion because that would be unfair. Let's say film description, but that is what perhaps attracts me more than just a description part about it. So my question to you is of this long.
I loved what you said about trust, by the way. That's very interesting. In Lutera, the trust has to be rebuilt in the second half again. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
So my question to you is, let us suppose if you're not writing a review for a reader, but if you're writing a review of actually what you feel, what would be, and this might be different for different people, but to you specifically, because you're the only film reviewer that I'm talking to, what is your instinctive style? Do you want to give a descriptive ones, or you want to talk about some themes that stuck you, which may or may not resonate with the reader?
I think it's a little bit of both. The theme element is what you said about the trust. To me, the romance was the theme in Lutera, for instance. But trust could have been very, very interesting also, how two characters fall in love and how they sort of start to mistrust each other, and then have to restart from a blank slate to build that trust again in the second half. So that is a theme, but it's also helping you to get to the audience or whoever's going to be reading your stuff, get a sense of what you're trying to say, what the film is about. And then in the body of the thing, I think it's very, very important, especially a film, or a play, for instance, to write about lots of other elements. That's why I think it's very important to write about the acting. It's very important about cinematography, how every shot is lit, how scenes are lit, how first half or the second half is lit, how the music sort of enhances your emotions and everything else. Um, the clothes that the actors wear, the costumes, how they represent the time period and the reality of those actors. All of that is very important for a review, because the thing is that you need to be able to acknowledge various departments that have worked in the film, especially departments who've done a good job, and that builds the narrative story that you're building, basically, to be able to tell somebody who's going to read a thing, um, what's the film about. The songs in Lutera are really beautiful, and I think it was important to mention those songs. And the music, how it builds up, I think it's very, very important to. I think I mentioned also how Amit Trivedi's background score. It's not in your face. You don't even realize it, and then you realize, you start to think like, why am I feeling like that? Wow, the music is helping build that sense also. So it has to be
Very
a
true.
blend of what.
Very true. And I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but at least in Lutera, I've sensed certain, what's the right word? Mukra, not a mukra. Certain strands of the music or certain songs which are very globalized. So I thought I heard Chhabra from Simon Garfunkel in one of the songs, a certain strain of that song. Not necessarily direct copy, but you could get the strain of the song. I heard a piece of Beatles somewhere else around there. And of course, there's a whole bowl music of the Bengal. So it's
Yeah.
yeah. So you're right. It was pretty interesting in that sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Shatanu.
Thank you.
Anamika, over to you for the last question of the evening.
Thank you so much, Ishan. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aseem ji. That was really wonderful. You talked about reviewing with experience and also with feelings. I think that's very, very important. I also like the way you talked about the influencers and the social media persons. They express their opinions, but review, although they call it a review, all the time may not be that's what they are trying to. My question is slightly different than what you discussed today. If I may ask you a question about Irfan Khan, but related to review, will that be okay with you, Aseem ji?
Sure.
So, as we know, I personally think Irfan Khan is one of the greatest actors we have ever had. Uh, you researched about him and spoke to him and interviewed him.
No, I
So,
didn't smoke. Anyway, yeah.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
you researched about him.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, my point is, knowing him, did your opinion or review about any movies changed or evolved or became different?
Well, I think I got to know him by watching so many of his films also. I got to,
Okay.
when you see something like The Namesake, or when you
Yeah.
see, I think one of the first films of Irfan I saw was Makbool, for instance. I saw Warrior later. Um, I learned a lot about Irfan, well, by watching the films, and then by talking to the directors about how do they work with him doing those films. Irfan was, when I started to work on the book, he was already getting cancer treatment. So I spoke to him once on the phone when he was in London for getting treatment. I'd interviewed him, brief interviews, not extensive interviews earlier. But as I said, I learned a lot. So my opinions about the films, while I'd seen Namesake maybe once or twice before I began to write the book. Makbul also had seen, but when I eventually started to write the book, I started to watch the films with a very different perspective. I mean, often just literally focusing on Irfan's performance and how his character sort of evolves and what's the arc, and then talking to the director or some of the other actors who worked with him about the processes that they remember his of him. And that helped me to understand Irfan. That helped me to understand the films also in a very different way.
That was my question because my understanding is that when you talk to a director or somebody really closely associated, you also probably understand their process and constraints better. And uh, it, it- and I think that kind of gives you probably a new perspective about how they still could make such an amazing thing within that constraint. So, with Irfan Khan, I wanted to know specifically if any film you saw with a completely different light after knowing more about him. By interview, I meant interviewing others. I have read about the book, and unfortunately, I have not read the book, but I will for sure.
Well, so I'll give you an example with the namesake, which I'd seen before. I think I'd seen it at least twice before. Then I went to interview Meera Nair, and maybe I saw the film again. I usually would want to watch the film immediately before I'm going to interview. And some of the things she told me that she had worked with. There's a scene towards the middle of the film or something like that where he finally starts to tell his son the meaning of the name Gogol,
Yes.
and how Irfan's character Ashok was in a train accident, and he thinks that the book that he was carrying, the overcoat, is what had saved his life. And so here is this man sitting in the car with his son, telling the story to his son. And Meera said that he played the role very, very well, but then he could read from Meera's face that there was something else that she wanted, and she said kuch aur chahiye, and he said I need thoda sa aansu in your eyes, but it should not trickle down itna ki itna zor se trickle down. So once I'd heard Meera talk about it, and I watched that scene again in the film, and you should also if you read my book or watch the scene again, I was able to understand a lot about how Irfan as an actor could work, that he had this control over his emotions, that he was able to bring tears, well up tears, and his eyes became, but he also could control the quantity of tears, that they were there, and his eyes were glistening with the tears, but they would not start to trickle down. That was a very fascinating aspect of Irfan, the actor, that I learned by
That's
so
fantastic. He being a Bengali and kind of knowing that Kolkata a little bit more. Also, I think he became more Bengali than a lot of Bengali in his body language and simple gesture. It's unbelievable. Both of them, Tabu also.
yeah,
By the way, Aseemji, thank you so much. This is what I
thank you.
wanted to understand from your point of view, because when you go back to the film after knowing more about the actor, does your perspective or way of looking at the movie change? And you just gave a brilliant example. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anamika ji. And this was one reason, his brilliance was one reason that we chose Aseem to be part of this, because he's brilliant. He's one of the most honest film critics that I have met and interacted with,
Thank you, Ishan.
along with Namrata and of course Chhabra, who are all part of this whole one group. And all of them are brilliant. And हमारे बीच में एक जोक है between me and my friends who watch films के Rediff सिर्फ और सिर्फ असीम साहब की वजह से चल रहा है, otherwise Rediff was long gone. It is his articles that is keeping the ship sailing
Oh
even
God,
today.
thank you.
And
You're being
one
very,
of
very kind.
his best reviews that I recently read was of Kohra, the Netflix show.
Yeah.
And
I interviewed the actor. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
that was a very good review that I read after a very long time. And then even I think Batman, you reviewed Batman as well. So that was again a very good interview that I found out on Reddit. So all of you should actually read as many reviews as possible. Read his interviews because his interviews are brilliant. You know, whether it is of his, follow him on Twitter. Whenever he's in a film festival, he keeps tweeting about what is happening there. So it's live footage that you get from Aseem and Namrata on social
Thank
media.
you. Thank
So
you.
thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Aseem. His books are brilliant. I love the Shri Kapoor book because of history, but of course, Irfan's book is more important and special for Aseem as well as for others who love Irfan. Because
Yeah.
as much as you write about Irfan, it seems you have just started. You are at the tip of an iceberg. You know, you have just started realizing how big the actor was and how big the man was more than the actor. There's so much more to that
Yeah. Yeah.
actor than
Yeah.
just acting. But thank you so much, Aseem, for being such a
Thank
sport
you.
and for doing this. It was lovely
You.
hosting you for the second time on Carvan. And
Yes.
now that
Thank
you are
you.
back in Delhi, I look forward to meeting you and treating you to a cup of good coffee
We met
someday.
briefly one time
Yes, we met
at the
during Saeed's
Said Mirza's
retrospective,
film screening. Yes. 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 Yes.
but we
All
should
right,
actually
guys.
have long chats now.
Definitely.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Aseem.
all. Thank you for being so patient and so kind, all of you. Thank you,
Bye
Ishan.
bye.
Yeah.